That woman! She's giving the kids medication. Gloria snarled her accusation as sharp as a knife. Mr. James, there's no way those two children who were up all night are now sleeping like angels. She's definitely doing something illegal with those kids. Kesha Williams, only 28 years old, stood motionless in the marble-floored hallway, her calm eyes watching the 60-year-old housekeeper's dramatics unfold. She wasn't surprised. In fact, she'd anticipated this moment 3 weeks earlier, the instant she stepped into the house to take on the job of caring for the 4-year-old twins, Angels, who had sent countless nannies running in tears for 6 long months. James Whitmore, the real estate mogul, a widower with lingering sorrow in his eyes, leaned against the living room doorway. He looked up at Gloria, the housekeeper who had been with the Whitmore family for 15 years, then shifted his gaze to Kesha. The contrast between the two women was stark. One, a storm of fervor and accusation, the other unsettlingly calm, almost indifferent. Gloria, those are very serious accusations. James sighed, his voice heavy with discomfort. He didn't want to believe it, but his desperation for the rare peace in his home made him hesitate. Gloria moved closer to James, her voice lowered but still full of contempt. Serious, Mr. James. This person came from the outskirts of Detroit without a single decent letter of recommendation, and suddenly the children who used to scream from nightmares every night are now sleeping soundly like newborns. Don't you see anything wrong with that? There's something very wrong. Kesha took a deep breath. Her eyes briefly met James's just for an instant. She recognized in his eyes not only gratitude for the peace she had brought to the house, but also a flicker of genuine curiosity. A silent question seemed to linger in that gaze. Who are you? Why would a young woman with such unusual confidence accept a job that so many other nannies had fled from in tears? If you're absolutely determined to investigate my methods. Kesha began, her voice soft, surprisingly calm, making Gloria flinch slightly. Her confidence was like a solid, unshakable wall. I suggest installing cameras in the children's room. That way, everyone can see exactly what happens at night. The entire room fell silent. Gloria stood rigid, her eyes wide, unable to believe her ears. The suggestion caught everyone off guard. A guilty person would never ask for more surveillance. James frowned, his gaze fixed on Kesha's calm face. There was something in her demeanor, a powerful composure that was nothing like a mere child care provider. Her presence compelled even the family's important guests to listen to her opinions about the children. 3 weeks earlier, when the employment agency called to offer her services, James had been desperate. 6 nannies had quit in less than 2 months. Ruby and Rose, severely traumatized by their mother's sudden death in a car accident, spent every night screaming, refusing to sleep. The entire house was consumed by exhaustion, the silence a thin veneer over the chaos within. Gloria, for her part, had always made her opinions clear about those kinds of people, caring for the children of distinguished families. She didn't trust strangers, especially those without clear backgrounds. But when Kesha arrived that afternoon, everything changed immediately. The twins, usually hostile toward strangers, inexplicably approached her with curiosity as if drawn by an invisible force. And on the first night a miracle happened. They slept for 6 straight hours. Cameras? Gloria stammered, clearly not expecting that answer. Well, that's not necessary if she just... Kesha cut Gloria off slowly, pulling her phone from her pocket, its screen emitting a soft glow. I've recorded some nighttime routines to document the children's progress. Would you like to see? Once again, silence filled the room. James noticed the subtle shift on Gloria's face from defiance to near panic. In the middle of the hallway, where generations of noble families had made decisions about the fate of their staff, Kesha stood firm, holding secrets too big to reveal before the opportune moment. Gloria refused to yield. In her 15 years working for the Whitmore family, she had built a reputation for absolute loyalty, and she wouldn't allow an opportunist to destroy her privileged position in this home. Mr. James, you need to understand what's happening. Gloria insisted, trying to regain her composure, but her voice still betrayed panic and discomfort. She walked to the large window overlooking the lush garden where Ruby and Rose were playing. Their clear laughter echoed a sound James hadn't heard in months. This woman appeared out of nowhere with no letters of recommendation from decent families, and suddenly she has magical power over the children. "Come on," she said, as if trying to convince herself. James watched his two daughters, his heart warming as he saw them running freely on the lawn. Their laughter, once a painful reminder of his late wife, now brought hope. The change was undeniable. They ate regularly, slept 8 hours every night, and had even returned to preschool without panic or fear. "Gloria, perhaps you're overreacting. It's clear the children are—" James began, but was cut off. "The children are being manipulated," Gloria shrieked, the housekeeper's voice rising an octave, almost a hiss. "And you don't see it because you're desperate for a solution. But I know her type. They arrive, humbly perform temporary miracles, and then start demanding privileges. First a raise, then expensive gifts for their families, and then access to your accounts." Kesha remained still, her eyes observing Gloria's dramatic performance with an unsettlingly calm expression. Her composure only angered the housekeeper more, almost to the point of losing control. This tense confrontation was just the beginning of a much more complex story where prejudices, truths, and secrets would gradually be revealed. In reality, this reaction was exactly what Kesha had anticipated from day one. 3 weeks prior, stepping off the worn-out bus at the corner of the Whitmore estate, she knew precisely what she was getting herself into. Growing up in Detroit, the daughter of a domestic worker for affluent families, she'd witnessed similar scenarios countless times, seasoned staff defending their territory against newcomers, especially when those newcomers didn't fit the unspoken societal standards. What Gloria couldn't possibly know was that Kesha Williams wasn't just an ordinary nanny. She held a master's degree in child psychology from the prestigious University of Michigan, had served as a pediatric trauma counselor at 3 leading hospitals, and had chosen this particular job for very specific reasons entirely unrelated to money or status. In Kesha's deep-set eyes lay a wealth of knowledge and experience hidden behind an unusually serene demeanor. "Do you know what bothers me the most?" Gloria continued, her voice now stripped of its usual haughtiness, replaced by anger and agitation. "It's her composure. A normal woman would be worried about being accused of giving children medication, but look at her. She stands there as if she knows something we don't." James frowned. He had to admit that Gloria's observation held some truth. Kesha indeed exuded an almost disconcerting confidence, a self-assured air as if she were always 3 steps ahead of everyone, holding the key to every secret. "Actually," Kesha quietly began, her voice a thin thread cutting through the tense atmosphere, yet carrying surprising weight, "I do know something you don't." Silence enveloped the room. Gloria paled slightly, as if she had just touched something cold and terrifying that she wasn't ready to face. James's face tightened. He held his breath, waiting. "I know Ruby wakes up at 2:30 in the morning because she dreams she's falling just like her mother when the car flipped." Kesha continued, her voice still calm, but each word she uttered carried incredible gravity. "I know Rose can't sleep until she checks all the doors are locked because subconsciously she thinks the house isn't safe since her mother left and didn't return." James felt a chill run down his spine. How could she know such specific details about his daughter's nightmares? These were unspoken fears, fragmented pieces of a tragedy he had never told anyone, not even Gloria, about the accident, about how Amanda, his wife, was found. "I also know—" Kesha continued, her gaze now fixed directly on Gloria, seemingly piercing through the housekeeper's arrogant facade. "You told the other nannies in the area that this family needs someone of the same social standing to care for the children. Those messages in the high-end domestic staff WhatsApp group are quite interesting, aren't they?" Gloria's face shifted from pale to crimson in a few seconds, like a flame flaring up and then dying out. She stammered, her voice broken by shock and fury. "How could you? I never—" "Oh, but you did." Kesha coldly interrupted, her composure a stark contrast to Gloria's panic. "You even said I was probably here to swindle this lonely widower. That was your exact message last Thursday." James slowly turned to Gloria, his face etched with profound disbelief. "Is that true?" The housekeeper stammered, clearly in extreme distress. How could this woman have access to her private messages, and why did she seem to know exactly how to unsettle her so much? Kesha remained calm, but her eyes held a flicker of something Gloria finally recognized. It wasn't just erudition, but also latent danger. This was a woman who not only knew her secrets, but had also prepared herself for this very confrontation. "The truth, Mr. Whitmore, is that I took this job because your family needs more than just a nanny," Kesha said, her voice filled with certainty. "And Gloria," she smiled faintly, a knowing smile that sent a shiver down Gloria's spine, "has actively prevented any real progress in this house for far longer than you realize." For the first time since he'd known the housekeeper, James saw genuine fear in her eyes. And for the first time since hiring Kesha, he began to suspect that this quiet woman was far more than she appeared. Every accusation from Gloria seemed only to strengthen something within Kesha, a silent power that grew in direct proportion to the injustice being forced upon her. It was as if each act of contempt was fueling a plan far grander than anyone present could imagine. "Do you want to know the truth about what's happening in this house?" Kesha asked, her voice maintaining a calm that even James was starting to find unsettling. He felt a jolt run down his spine, an irresistible urge to find out. "Then let's start from the beginning." She walked to a nearby table and picked up a leather briefcase James had never seen before. The briefcase had a simple appearance, yet it exuded a mysterious energy, as if it contained countless untold stories. "Gloria, are you sure you want to continue with these accusations? Because once I open this briefcase, there will be no turning back." The panic in the housekeeper's eyes was now almost palpable, spreading through the thick air. "Mr. James, she's trying to intimidate us. This is exactly the kind of manipulative behavior I was talking about." But James watched, captivated by the transformation unfolding before him. The woman he'd hired as a nanny was revealing layers of complexity that completely surpassed his expectations. Kesha wasn't just polite. She was strategic. She wasn't just capable. She was formidable. 3 weeks ago, when I took this job, Kesha continued, slowly unlocking the briefcase, "it wasn't because I was desperate for work." She paused, her sharp gaze sweeping over James before settling on Gloria, making the housekeeper shiver. "It was because I received a very interesting call from someone you know well." She pulled an audio recording from her phone. "Dr. Patricia Coleman, the pediatrician who's treated Ruby and Rose for 2 years. She contacted me after Gloria called to question my professional competence even before I started working here." James felt a chill run down his spine. "Gloria, you called the children's doctor. I just wanted to check if she knew this person." Gloria stammered, her face white. She had completely fallen into a trap. She had set herself a trap she didn't even know existed. Kesha pressed play. Dr. Coleman's clear, serious voice filled the silent room like an undeniable verdict. "Gloria, I need to tell you something. Kesha Williams isn't just an ordinary nanny. She has a master's degree in child psychology and specializes in pediatric trauma. When I heard she was taking care of the Whitmore twins, I was very curious. A professional of her caliber doesn't take on domestic work out of necessity." The sounds of children playing in the garden drifted in, breaking the tense silence in the grand hall, but they couldn't alleviate the astonishment spreading through James Whitmore's mind. He looked at Kesha Williams as if seeing her for the first time, not as a nanny, but as a woman with untold secrets. "You have a master's degree, University of Michigan," James exclaimed, his voice a mix of disbelief and shock. He tried to piece together the fragmented information about Kesha in his mind. Kesha smiled faintly, a knowing smile filled with confidence. "I worked at Detroit Children's Hospital for 5 years before opening my own child trauma clinic. The question, Mr. Whitmore, is why a trauma psychologist would close a successful practice to become a nanny." Gloria was now clearly in a state of extreme panic. Her face was ashen, her lips moving silently. Her entire world seemed to be collapsing beneath her feet. That doesn't make sense," Gloria stammered, her voice trembling. "If you're that qualified, why would I take a job that pays only 1/10 of my previous income?" Kesha finished the question, her gaze never leaving Gloria. "Because it's not about the money, Gloria. It's about justice." She slowly retrieved a stack of documents from the leather briefcase. Every one of her gestures was unsettlingly calm, like a craftsman meticulously refining a complex work of art. James held his breath, waiting. 6 months ago, Mr. James, you fired an employee for cultural incompatibility," Kesha said, her voice now carrying a sharpness James had never heard. "Do you remember Marcus Johnson, the black engineer who designed your latest residential complex?" James frowned, clearly uncomfortable. A vague memory resurfaced. Marcus, right there were some issues. The issue was that Gloria suggested to your HR manager that employees like him might not fit the Whitmore image. Kesha placed a document on the table, a clearly printed email. An email dated March 3rd sent to 5 people on the board of directors. Gloria paled, taking a step back as if pushed by an invisible wall. How do you have access to internal company emails? Her voice was now just a whisper. Because Marcus Johnson is my brother. The revelation exploded in the room like a bomb, shaking the very foundations of what James had once believed. All the pieces suddenly fit together with brutal precision. And when he told me about the systemic discrimination he endured here, I decided to investigate for myself the domestic environment that produced this kind of professional mindset. James sank into the luxurious armchair, trying to process the information swirling in his mind. The housekeeper he had trusted for 15 years, whom he considered family, had interfered with business decisions based on insidious racial prejudice. And the woman who was changing his daughter's lives, bringing the peace he craved, was the sister of the man he had unjustly fired. A surge of guilt and shame rose, weighing heavily on his chest. Marcus lost his job 2 days before his 3rd child was born. Kesha continued, her voice maintaining an astonishingly controlled intensity, yet still retaining a chilling calm. He was unemployed for 4 months, almost lost his house, and his wife suffered from postpartum depression that went untreated due to lack of health insurance. I didn't know. James mumbled, genuinely shocked. This truth was even more brutal than he could have imagined. Of course you didn't know. Gloria made sure you never found out. Kesha turned to the housekeeper, her eyes like knives. Because people like you operate in the shadows, whispering venomous words into the ears of decision-makers, sowing doubt about the competence of those you deem unfit. Gloria tried to play one last desperate card, a weak attempt at resistance. Mr. James, she's here to harm us. This is a trap. She planned it all. You're right, Gloria. I planned it all. Kesha smiled. But the smile wasn't warm. It was dangerous, filled with determination and a hint of vindication. But not to harm anyone. I planned it to expose the truth about how prejudice operates in families like this, how it permeates everything from household decisions to company matters. She picked up her phone and showed James a series of messages. Every conversation over the past 21 days has been legally recorded with consent. I announced on day 1 that I would be recording my work for professional purposes. Every racist comment, every attempt to sabotage, every time you tried to interfere with my relationship with the children. James watched Gloria collapse right before his eyes. The woman he had once respected as a steadfast pillar of the family, who had stood by him through so many years, was now systematically exposed as someone who acted on deep-seated and dangerous prejudices. Her face was contorted with fear and humiliation. The children are able to sleep because they finally have someone who understands childhood trauma taking care of them. Kesha said, her voice now a little softer but still authoritative. Not because they were drugged, but because they were cared for by a qualified professional who recognized the signs of unresolved pain in young children and knew how to soothe them. She closed the briefcase, the dry click echoing like an undeniable conclusion. Kesha looked directly at James, her gaze sharp and challenging. The question now is, what will you do with this information? Will you continue to let people like Gloria influence your decisions about your employees and about your own daughters? Just then, Ruby and Rose suddenly burst through the doorway, their cheeks flushed from playing, their clear laughter echoing like joyful musical notes. "Daddy, Miss Keisha, we found a bird's nest in the oak tree." The children's radiant innocence sharply contrasted with the heavy, suffocating atmosphere in the room. Kesha knelt to greet them, a radiant smile on her face. James watched his daughters cling to her with absolute trust, a trust that had taken them months to build with any adult after their mother's tragic death. In that moment, watching that scene, an obvious truth struck James. His daughters finally were happy. And that happiness he knew came from Kesha. The housekeeper he trusted was exposed as a bigot, while the woman saving his family revealed she was seeking justice for her own brother. James realized he was at the center of a lesson on how privilege and power could be used to perpetuate injustice or to rectify it. But what neither James nor Gloria knew was that Kesha had recorded more than just conversations and messages. She had uncovered connections between Gloria's domestic prejudice and Whitmore's corporate practices extending far beyond her brother's case. These connections, once revealed, would not only destroy one person's career, but could also change how the city's business elite thought about social responsibility and the consequences of prejudice. The twins' appearance temporarily eased the tension, but Kesha knew this was the moment she had been waiting for weeks. "Ruby Rose," she said, "do you want to show Daddy and Mrs. Gloria the drawing you made yesterday about our nighttime routine?" The two girls eagerly ran off to get the drawing, leaving the three adults in a heavy silence. Gloria seized the opportunity to launch one last desperate attack. "Mr. James, she's even manipulating the children. This is proof." Kesha gently cut her off, picking up her tablet. "Are you sure you want to continue?" "Because we still have 15 minutes of footage from Ruby's birthday party last month when you told Mrs. Henderson that people like me shouldn't have access to children from traditional families." Gloria's face went from red to ashen. The birthday party was a major social event attended by at least 20 elite families. If those recordings became public. "I also have your messages in the high-end nanny's WhatsApp group." Kesha continued scrolling through the screen, "where you shared my photos without permission, speculating about my true intentions with this family." James stepped forward, taking the tablet from Kesha's hand. His expression hardened as he read the messages. "Gloria, you shared photos of my children's nanny with strangers discussing our family's private life." "Mr. James, I was just being careful." "Careful?" James's voice rose an octave. "You've invaded my family's privacy, spread personal information, and even dared to interfere with my business decisions based on racial prejudice." Kesha observed the situation with controlled satisfaction. She had carefully planned each revelation, knowing that James's pride as a father and a businessman would be the strongest weapon against Gloria's toxic influence. "But there's more," she said, opening another folder on the tablet. "Gloria, do you remember suggesting the dismissal of 3 black employees from Whitmore over the past 2 years, always with reasons that sounded technical?" Silence fell. James looked at the housekeeper as if seeing her for the first time. Jennifer Watson, the financial analyst, was fired after Gloria suggested that people like her might not fit the company's conservative corporate culture. David Miller, the architect, was moved to a less prestigious department after Gloria commented on his suitability for the client profile. "And my brother Marcus, of course. How did you get this internal information?" James asked, genuinely confused. "Because after Marcus was fired, I began systematically investigating the patterns of dismissals at your company. I discovered that Gloria regularly contacted 5 people in your human resources department, always making comments about employees based on her observations at social events and family gatherings." Kesha showed him a detailed spreadsheet. In the past 3 years, 16 Black or Latinx employees have been fired or demoted at Whitmore Industries. In 60% of those cases, there's an email or call from Gloria in the file, always suggesting cultural concerns or questioning their suitability for the environment. James slumped back, running a hand through his hair. "My God, Gloria, is this true?" The housekeeper finally collapsed. I just wanted to protect the family's reputation. People like her don't understand our values, our traditions." James exploded. "What values? Discrimination, prejudice, destroying the lives of capable people just because of their skin color." Just then, Ruby and Rose ran back with their drawings. "Look, this is Miss Kesha reading us a story," Rose chirped, showing off a colorful drawing of a black woman sitting between 2 children, all smiling. "And this is her teaching us about the stars," Ruby added, presenting another drawing where Kesha pointed to a star-filled sky, while the 2 girls looked up in wonder. The innocence of the drawings sharply contrasted with the toxic reality that had just been exposed in the room. James looked at his daughters, finally happy, sleeping soundly, and confident, realizing the gravity of the injustice he had allowed to happen right under his roof. "Gloria," he said, his voice now controlled but unforgiving, "you're fired. I want you out of this house today. Mr. James, please, 15 years of service. 15 years of influencing my decisions with prejudice," he corrected. 15 years of sabotaging competent employees. 15 years of poisoning the environment of my home and my company. Me. Kesha picked up one final folder from her documents. "James, there's one more thing you need to know." If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps give light to voices that deserve to be seen and heard. The housekeeper James had trusted implicitly for 15 years was exposed as an insidious bigot, while the woman who had restored peace to his family revealed she was seeking justice for her own brother. James realized he was at the center of a harsh lesson on how privilege and power could be abused to maintain injustice, or used to rectify it. He felt a surge of shame recognizing his own blindness. But what neither James nor Gloria knew was that Kesha had recorded more than just conversations and messages. In her weeks of secretly living in the Whitmore mansion, she had discovered connections between Gloria's subtle discrimination and the Whitmore Company's corporate practices connections that went far beyond her brother's case. These clues, once revealed, would not only destroy one person's career, but could also change how the city's business elite thought about social responsibility and the consequences of prejudice. A tsunami was about to break, threatening to engulf what seemed most stable. The twins' innocent appearance temporarily eased the tension like a clear note lost in a symphony of outrage. But Kesha knew this was the moment she'd been waiting for weeks. "Ruby Rose," she said softly, "do you want to show Daddy and Mrs. Gloria the drawing you made yesterday about our nighttime routine?" The two girls enthusiastically cheered, quickly running off to get their colorful drawings, leaving the three adults in a heavy silence, awaiting a new chapter in the confrontation. Gloria seized the last opportunity to launch a desperate attack. "Mr. James, she's even manipulating the children. This is proof." Kesha cut off the housekeeper gently but firmly, picking up her tablet. "Are you sure you want to continue? Because we still have 15 minutes of footage from Ruby's birthday party last month when you told Mrs. Henderson that people like me shouldn't have access to children from traditional families." Gloria's face changed from flushed with anger to white with fear, like an erased page. The birthday party was a significant social event attended by at least 20 of the city's elite families. If those recordings became public, her reputation would be shattered, setting off a domino effect that would impact her position within high society. "I also have your messages in the high-end nanny's WhatsApp group." Kesha continued, her fingers scrolling across the tablet screen, clearly displaying each venomous line. "Where you shared my photos without permission, speculating about my true intentions with this family." James stepped forward, his hand trembling as he took the tablet from Kesha. His expression hardened as he read each message, disgust clearly visible in his eyes. "Gloria, you shared photos of my children's nanny with strangers discussing our family's private life." "Mr. James, I was just being careful." Gloria tried to excuse herself. Her voice choked. "Careful." James's voice rose an octave, carrying explosive anger. "You've invaded my family's privacy, spread personal information, and even dared to interfere with my business decisions based on racial prejudice." Kesha observed the situation with controlled satisfaction. She had carefully planned each revelation, knowing that James's pride as a father, a family head, and a businessman would be the strongest weapon against Gloria's toxic influence. "But there's more," she said, opening another folder on the tablet. Documents and messages appeared on the screen like undeniable evidence. "Gloria, do you remember suggesting the dismissal of 3 black employees from Whitmore over the past 2 years, always with reasons that sounded technical?" Silence blanketed the room, heavy as lead. James looked at the housekeeper as if seeing her truly for the first time, seeing a completely different person from what he had known. Jennifer Watson, the financial analyst, was fired after Gloria suggested that people like her might not fit the company's conservative corporate culture. David Miller, the architect, was moved to a less prestigious department after Gloria commented on his suitability for the client profile. He paused, taking a deep breath. "And my brother Marcus, of course. How did you get this internal information?" James asked, genuinely confused and astonished by Kesha's meticulous preparation. "Because after Marcus was fired, I began systematically investigating the patterns of dismissals at your company." Kesha explained, her voice cold but logical. "I discovered that Gloria regularly contacted 5 people in your human resources department, always making comments about employees based on her observations at social events and family gatherings. She showed him a detailed spreadsheet with neatly arranged columns and rows listing each case. Over the past 3 years, 16 Black or Latinx employees have been fired or demoted at Whitmore Industries. Kesha pointed to the spreadsheet, each number a powerful indictment. In 60% of those cases, there's an email or call from Gloria in the file, always suggesting cultural concerns or questions about their suitability for the environment. James slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. His heart ached not just from the truth about Gloria, but also from the truth about his own company, which he had built with his life's work. My God, Gloria, is this true? The housekeeper finally collapsed, tears streaming down her wrinkled face, all her arrogance dissolving. I just wanted to protect the family's reputation. People like her don't understand our values, our traditions. James erupted, his voice echoing through the room, carrying immense disappointment and fury. What values? Discrimination, prejudice, destroying the lives of capable people just because of their skin color. At that very moment, Ruby and Rose ran back, each child holding a colorful drawing. Look, this is Miss Kesha reading us a story, Rose chirped, showing off a drawing of a Black woman sitting between two children, all smiling brightly. And this is her teaching us about the stars, Ruby added, presenting another drawing where Kesha pointed to a star-filled sky, while the two girls looked up in wonder. The radiant, pure innocence of the drawings sharply contrasted with the toxic reality that had just been exposed in the room. James looked at his daughters, finally happy, sleeping soundly, and confident, realizing the gravity of the injustice he had allowed to happen right under his own roof within his own company. Gloria, he said, his voice now controlled but unforgiving, filled with the cold determination of a mogul. You're fired. I want you out of this house today. Mr. James, please, 15 years of service, Gloria sobbed, pleading. 15 years of influencing my decisions with prejudice, he corrected, his voice like ice. 15 years of sabotaging competent employees. 15 years of poisoning the environment of my home and my company. Kesha calmly picked up one last folder from her stack of documents. Her eyes met James's, an inexplicable light glinting within them. James, there's one more thing you need to know. Not only did she influence firing decisions, but Kesha also revealed Gloria had prevented hiring. She handed James a thick stack of resumes. 23 highly qualified candidates were rejected in the past 2 years after Gloria conducted unofficial checks on their families and backgrounds. Among them were 2 MIT graduate engineers, an award-winning architect, and an analyst with an MBA from Harvard. James flipped through the resumes, his face pale as he grasped the bitter truth. All of them were Black or Latinx, he remarked, his voice full of bitterness, professionals who could have contributed significantly to the company. That's right, Kesha confirmed. Meanwhile, less qualified candidates who fit Gloria's standards were hired at higher salaries and in better positions. Gloria made one last desperate attempt, her voice shrill. Mr. James, she set this all up. This is a conspiracy against me. Kesha smiled faintly, a smile full of depth and power. A conspiracy? Gloria, it would be a conspiracy if I fabricated your words, forged your emails, created your WhatsApp messages. All I did was record and organize your own actions. Kesha's words were like sharp needles piercing through Gloria's weak denial. James turned to his daughters, who were watching the tension between the adults, with confused expressions, their innocent eyes not fully grasping what was happening. Girls, go play in the garden for a bit while the adults finish talking, James said, trying to keep his voice calm. When the children left, he faced Gloria one last time, his eyes gleaming with unshakable resolve. You have 1 hour to pack your belongings. I don't want to see you on this property again. What about the company? Kesha asked, her gaze still scrutinizing James, awaiting his final verdict. James took a deep breath as if gathering all his strength and clarity. Tomorrow morning, I will initiate a full audit of all hiring and firing procedures over the past 3 years. All affected employees will be contacted with offers of reinstatement or compensation. His words were not just a personal decision, but a promise, a commitment to right the wrongs. Gloria stumbled out of the room utterly defeated. 15 years of influence and power built on a foundation of prejudice and manipulation had crumbled in less than an hour before the undeniable evidence of her own discriminatory actions. Kesha watched the housekeeper leave, feeling a deep, controlled satisfaction. It wasn't cruelty, but justice executed with surgical precision, a necessary healing for wounds that had been hidden. Why? James asked when they were alone, his voice lower, full of contemplation. Why go through all this trouble? Coming here caring for my daughters, confronting prejudice just to expose Gloria. He needed an explanation, a reason to understand the entire situation. Because injustice unchallenged is injustice maintained. Keisha replied simply, her gaze steady on James, holding an unyielding resolve. And because Ruby and Rose deserve to grow up in an environment where competence matters more than skin color, where they can see fairness practiced right in their own home and their father's company. But there was still one final revelation that neither James nor Gloria knew. A discovery Keisha had made about the true connection between Gloria's domestic discrimination and a broader network of systemic exclusion spanning the city's business elite. This link was about to change not just one family, but an entire corporate culture that had relied on unquestioned privilege for so many years. 6 months later, the change in the Whitmore twins' lives was just a small part of the larger revolution Keisha had quietly orchestrated. Marcus Johnson sat in his new office at Whitmore Industries, now the Director of Sustainable Development, a position specifically created to leverage his expertise in inclusive housing projects. His salary was 40% higher than before, and he also received company stock as compensation for his bitter months of unemployment. "I still can't believe my sister did all of this," Marcus told James during a weekly meeting which now included discussions about corporate diversity, a topic never before mentioned. She planned every step for months. James smiled, looking out the window at the newly built community garden on the vacant lot next door. A project led by 3 employees, reinstated after the audit, bringing hope and green space to the community. "Your sister didn't just save my daughters. She saved my company from becoming obsolete in a world that no longer tolerates systemic discrimination," he said, his voice full of gratitude and admiration. The comprehensive audit James had promised revealed an even broader pattern than he had imagined. 23 employees were reinstated or appropriately compensated. 5 supervisors actively involved in discriminatory practices were fired, sending a strong message of change. The company implemented new anonymous hiring protocols where resumes were reviewed without photos or names, revealing ethnic origins, ensuring maximum fairness. As for Gloria, she discovered that 15 years of influence based on prejudice couldn't build a strong professional network. No elite families rehired her after Keisha's recordings were discreetly circulated within Nanny's WhatsApp groups. She now worked at a chain hotel, earning less than half of what she did at the Whitmore estate, a steep price to pay for the prejudices she had nurtured. "The most impressive thing," James continued, his voice contemplative, "is that she never wanted to destroy anyone. She wanted to change the system." Keisha had declined James's offer to become a permanent consultant for the company. Instead, she used her documented experience to establish a consulting firm specializing in detecting and correcting institutional prejudice, a much grander mission. Her first client was a network of hospitals in Detroit, facing lawsuits over discrimination in patient care, a meaningful beginning. Ruby and Rose, now 5 years old, attended a more diverse school that James specifically chose to broaden their world, helping them grow up in an environment not bound by prejudice. Keisha still visited them twice a week, no longer as a nanny, but as Aunt Keisha, the woman who had turned nightmares into peaceful dreams and taught them that family is built on love, not prejudice or background. "Daddy, is Aunt Keisha coming to my birthday?" Rose asked at breakfast. Wearing the star-shaped necklace, she never took off a symbol of the peace and happiness Keisha had brought. "Of course, Princess. And Uncle Marcus, too," James replied, still surprised by how natural it felt to call Keisha's brother family. The true measure of Keisha's success wasn't in her consulting firm's impressive numbers, or the 23 employees she helped reinstate at Whitmore Industries. It was the call she received last week from a young black mother in Chicago who had heard her interview on a social justice podcast. "My 6-year-old son is facing discrimination at school," the woman said. "His teacher says he has problems, but I know he's smart. Can you help me document what's happening?" Keisha smiled, picking up a new notebook, her eyes gleaming with an unshakable belief. "Let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything you've noticed. Because the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building bridges where there were once walls, creating opportunities where there was once exclusion, and turning pain into purpose." James Whitmore had learned that privilege without awareness is a dangerous weapon. But privilege with purpose can rewrite history. Gloria tried to use prejudice as power, but ultimately discovered that hatred always builds fragile sandcastles. As for Kesha, she used wisdom as justice and built a legacy that will last for generations, a legacy of change and hope. Kesha's story no longer belonged only to her. It had become a guiding light for those who had once been silenced by prejudice. The road ahead was still long and challenging, but now every call, every child heard, every family protected was one step closer to a more just world. That was Kesha Williams' greatest victory, a victory not announced by fists or power, but by courage, kindness, and the ability to rewrite the story of an entire generation. If you believe stories like this deserve to be shared, please hit subscribe to the Golden Echoes channel so you don't miss any other inspiring journeys. And don't forget to leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts on the moment that moved you most in this story. We'd love to hear your voice.